All right, we begin with that breaking news in the Middle East. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. President Trump just announced that Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on the exchange of hostages and prisoners. That exchange could happen in the next 48 hours. The hostage-prisoner swap would mark only the first phase of ending the war in Gaza. Mediators are still working out other details for a long-term peace, but this is big if this, in fact, happens. The development came to us just after this incredible moment in the White House. Secretary of State Marco Rubio interrupted a roundtable to pass a note to President Trump, leading to this from the commander-in-chief.
We're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly, so I will take a couple of more questions.
And President Trump then announcing he would be on the way to the Middle East himself. We have team coverage of this breaking news. Robert Sherman is on the ground in Tel Aviv, Israel. But let's start with NewsNation's Kelly Meyer now, who's live at the White House. Kelly, this is all moving very quickly. And just moments ago, President Trump posted a lengthy statement on Truth Social.
Yeah, that's right, Elizabeth. President Trump just posting this on Truth Social, saying that he is, quote, very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. He says this means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps toward a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. This is certainly a big moment, and as you mentioned, Elizabeth, something that he kind of alluded to when Marco Rubio interrupted that gathering, that roundtable that we were in earlier in the state dining room. The president said, "We are getting close. I have to go and join these discussions," and left the room. Afterwards, I was texting with sources, and a source with direct knowledge of the negotiations confirmed to me that they were, in fact, able to come to an agreement on this first phase. So we learned this about an hour ago here on NewsNation, that Israel and Hamas had agreed to the first phase of this, that some of the hostages would be released. President Trump says all of the hostages will be released. It also means the exchange of those Palestinian prisoners. My source also told me that this exchange is expected to happen in the next 48 hours or so. So that leads us into the weekend. The president, also in the state dining room, and we were there, said that he is thinking about going to the Middle East. Even a press statement from the press secretary said that he was thinking about and considering going to the Middle East as early as Friday. Now, my source also tells me that this could be signed as early as Thursday morning. Tomorrow, that could be in time in Egypt, but also it could be the time here in the U.S. So we're watching for that to be signed, as well as the rollout of this. But we still know that there's going to be more to be worked out. I wanted to play a bit more of what the president had to say.
We have a great team over there, great negotiators, and there are unfortunately great negotiators on the other side also. But it's something I think that will happen, got a good chance of happening. I may go there sometime toward the end of the week, maybe on Sunday, actually, and we'll see. But there's a very good chance.
So as the press secretary said in her statement, the president is considering going to the Middle East as early as Friday. The president said there it could be Saturday and Sunday. That would line up with what we're hearing about the release of those hostages. This is something that the president was hoping to reach. It just happened after the day after, October 7th. He just had a former hostage, Eden Alexander, and Omar Nutra's family in the Oval Office yesterday, Elizabeth. So a lot of moving pieces. We also, I will mention, don't have a lid here at the White House yet, so we don't know if we'll hear from the president on camera. It could just be this Truth Social post, but we'll be watching for that as well.
Right. A lid here at the White House, meaning a good night to all of you hardworking correspondents out there on the White House lawn. Kelly, where in the Middle East, do you have any indication from your sources, might the president be going? I know the negotiations are happening in Egypt, but obviously the hostage release would happen in Israel, and there are big questions as to how much of this the Israeli government has signed on to.
Yes, exactly. And I think we are hearing that the president, and he mentioned there in the state dining room, he is considering maybe going to Gaza. He said broadly the Middle East region. We don't know exactly where that might be, but I'll be checking with my sources to find out exactly how that plays out. But again, as you mentioned too, this is agreed to, but it still has to be signed. And there are many other parts to this peace plan that still have not been agreed to yet that they need to go through from the president's peace plan.
All right. Let us know if you hear any more information. We'll bring you back onto the show any moment you've got an update. Kelly Meyer at the White House tonight for us. Thank you so much. Now, obviously, for the Israeli and Palestinian people, this is a whole very familiar feeling of hope that has come and gone over the past 2 years with on-again, off-again negotiations. In Israel, those families now counting the hours until the 20 living hostages and the 28 believed to be dead come home. In Gaza, families who are desperate for food and humanitarian aid that have been very short supply ever since the war kicked off, they are hoping for relief as well. And tonight we have an exclusive first look at a new American-run aid site in Gaza. NewsNation is the only American news network on the ground there right now. Robert Sherman joins us now live. Robert, we're going to get to the aid in a bit, but I want to talk first about this breakthrough. What are you hearing there in Israel? I know that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had planned to meet with his cabinet tonight, perhaps, or in the next few hours. Have they voted on this agreement that the president is announcing?
I would say, Elizabeth, that Israel is very quiet right now about all of this. And of course, you mentioned the fact that there would be an Israeli withdrawal that would be taking place in all of this. We know that there are members of the prime minister's cabinet who don't like this deal and have plainly floated the possibility of having the discussions of even leaving the coalition. We have heard from other members of the Israeli government, particularly opposition leader Yair Lapid, who has vowed to fill those positions on the cabinet to give a so-called security net to the Israelis if it comes to that. The bottom line is that the prime minister has a lot of pressure to get the hostages out at this juncture here. And so what you're seeing here,
right, but there's a lot of pressure, Robert, to get the hostages out. There's a lot of pressure from President Trump to get this deal done. I am very struck by the wording of this Truth Social post from the president just a few moments ago. He says Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line. This is a big deal, and if this has not yet been voted on by the full cabinet, there is that risk, as you just pointed out, of his own governing coalition collapsing if those right-wing members refuse to go by this.
Yeah, and what we have seen from the president making mention of in some of these in the past is that this would be a staggered withdrawal that you would be seeing throughout the different phases of the deal. Big thing is the second phase of the deal, which is talking about demilitarization of Hamas. That all has to come through. Otherwise, from the Israeli perspective, the security guarantees or the security goals of this war have not been achieved.
Right.
What I would say, Elizabeth, is that an important element of all of this here is that you have seen all of these countries here in the Middle East put such a focus on the humanitarian situation that is ongoing in Gaza. That is a key element to trying to get a deal like this across the finish line, which we got an exclusive look at today.
The sound you hear is hunger being satisfied. Thousands of women and children braving the Gazan heat for onions, potatoes, simple things that make the difference between eating or not. They come every day, far and wide.
About 2 hours for her to travel here and back.
NewsNation, the first network to see this aid site near Han Yunis and Rafah up close, one of 4 operated by the American-run Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which claims to have delivered over 183 million meals since starting up this year.
These are certainly desperate, hungry people who are telling us that they rely on our boxes and our food to survive and to feed their family.
Where we are right now in the southern portion of the enclave is where it's better, it's easier to get food. But you head just a couple of miles north, the issue of feeding that whole population becomes much more difficult and at times more dire.
There is an ongoing Hamas threat. Our mission at GHF is to feed people in a way that Hamas or anyone else cannot steal, divert, or loot our aid. We have had zero diversion.
The IDF claims this video shows Hamas hijacking humanitarian aid as a means of exerting control over the enclave. And those who make the choice to hand out food for the GHF are rewarded with a bounty on their head. That's why faces are blurred. This Palestinian aid worker moves his family every 3 days to keep them safe.
Hamas is a bunch of criminals. They don't think of our people's needs for 17 years.
But many in the international community, including NGOs and American allies, contend the GHF is not up to the job, criticizing their use of private security contractors to keep order and claiming the aid sites are dangerous, leading to a boycott by the UN.
Now and again you hear that we're in a conversation about putting UN supplies through GHF or other mechanisms like it, and that's not a conversation that we've been having.
What do you say to that international criticism?
We are the only aid organization currently in Gaza able to deliver food effectively, safely, and at scale.
What's it like here? Is it easy to get food here?
Yes.
Yeah?
It's the youngest in Gaza who are the least afraid to speak their mind.
I hit in Hamas and I hit in Israel because of the damage in Gaza.
And yet, despite 2 years of war, still the biggest dreamers.
I want to visit Chicago and New York and Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I want to visit these countries, really.
Yes.
Yes.
Many of those Palestinians you saw there, tired, hungry, have been displaced again and again over the last 2 years. They told us today they were hoping for a peace that can last. Elizabeth?
We will see if that comes. It's important to note that pressure has been coming for the first time for this peace deal that President Trump wrote out. The pressure has been coming from all the Arab and Muslim countries in the region, but also from Palestinians inside Gaza who have had it with this war and feel like they are dying as a result of Hamas's actions. Robert Sherman, if you hear anything coming out of the Israeli government, please let us know. We'll get you back on the show. Thank you so much. All right, we're also following big news here in the United States. The high-profile arraignment of former FBI Director James Comey today, a case with major legal and political implications for our Justice Department. Comey appeared before a judge in Virginia today. He pleaded not guilty to 2 felony charges of perjury and obstruction. DOJ prosecutors claim the former FBI chief falsely testified to Congress in 2020, and by doing so, obstructed a congressional proceeding. That hearing in front of Congress had to do with the FBI's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Comey's charges stem from this moment, a question from Republican Texas Senator Ted Cruz about whether Comey authorized leaks of classified information to the media.
Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
Well, the judge in today's arraignment set a trial date for January 5th, but Comey's lawyers are working to get the case dismissed before January 5th ever comes. They argue this whole thing is politically motivated and that the U.S. attorney who led the indictment of Comey, Lindsay Halligan, was illegally appointed to the job by President Trump. A federal grand jury indicted Comey about 2 weeks ago, and it came after President Trump publicly called on his attorney general to indict Comey, writing in a social media post, "They're all guilty as hell. We can't delay any longer. Justice must be served now." Let's bring in our legal experts. Bill Brennan is a former attorney for President Trump, and John Fishwick is the former U.S. attorney for the Western District of Virginia. Gentlemen, great to have you back. I'm going to start with you, John. Comey's lawyer, Pat Fitzgerald, said he would move quickly to dismiss this case, calling it, quote, a vindictive and selective prosecution. Exhibit A is going to be that social media post I just read from President Trump. What do you think the judge is going to do?
Absolutely. That's going to be the headliner for the Comey legal team. They're going to say, look, Trump put pressure on the Eastern District of Virginia. They weren't going to bring charges. The previous U.S. attorney had stepped down over this very case. He didn't think there was enough evidence. And then Trump stepped in, tweeted out on Truth Social, and the charges were brought. And so the Comey team is going to say, this is all politics. It's all pressure from the president. What DOJ, though, is going to respond and say, well, not so fast. A grand jury indicted Mr. Comey, not us. Grand jury citizens came and heard the evidence, and they indicted him. But that's going to be a real showdown because the Comey team is going to get their head under the hood of DOJ. They want to get all the memos where they said we're not bringing charges. They want to get the memos where they said they are bringing charges, and they're going to say it's all politics. I think ultimately, though, a judge is going to look at the fact that the grand jury indicted and not dismiss it on that basis.
Yeah, Bill, there's a paper trail there. The previous U.S. attorney for the Eastern District either resigned, he says, or was fired, President Trump says, because he refused to indict. They are going to dig into all of that, aren't they? Could they even subpoena the former U.S. attorney as a witness?
Well, Elizabeth, I agree with John to a large degree. It's the old Harry Truman placard he had on his desk, lead, follow, or get out of the way. The U.S. attorney brought these charges, but there's a guardrail there. There's a fail-safe, and that's the citizens impaneled in the grand jury, and between 18 and 25 citizens apparently decided that there's enough on 2 of the 3 counts to bring charges. So certainly doesn't mean Mr. Comey's guilty. He's presumed innocent, but it survived a review by independent citizens, and it's a problem. So while the burden of trial is much, much higher beyond a reasonable doubt, Mr. Comey has a problem right now, similar to when he indicted Martha Stewart. And so many people said that there was no evidence, shouldn't have done it. And Martha Stewart was convicted, to my surprise, frankly. But now it's his turn in the dock, so to speak. So
you both think that his attorney will fail in getting this tossed, that, in fact, it will go to trial on January 5th. John, the other thing that sort of surprised me as I watched this morning is that Comey's lawyer complained to the judge that he's gotten no information yet on the specific details of these charges. The government hasn't revealed the identity of the witnesses in this case. How unusual is it that the government is yet to show, or because we saw the indictment, you were both with me the night the indictment was handed out, there was no information in it. It was a page and maybe a half.
Elizabeth, it's very bare bones. So the lawyers on the Comey team are going to do what's called file a bill of particulars, where we actually get to find out what is the exact statement that they're saying he lied about. I think we know from your lead-in, but we don't know for sure. But the Comey team they may lose. They are going to lose on this motion eventually. But this is something that they're going to appeal if they lose. There's going to be a lot of up and downs from the Eastern District of Virginia to the Fourth Circuit, potentially even to the Supreme Court on some of these issues. These motions are going to be litigated, hard-fought, ferocious battles, but whoever loses on some of these things is going to appeal. So I do not think that trial is going to take place on January 5th.
How unusual, though, John, is it that they haven't gotten any information on what exactly the charges are?
I don't think that's unusual because after all, the indictment just came down. They'll file a discovery motion. They'll get it all pretty soon. I think some of the delay may be that some of these documents are classified, but they'll get it. They would not have it this soon in most cases.
Jim.
I agree with that, John.
Yeah.
There's no right to discovery. Elizabeth, at this stage, this early stage, there's absolutely no right to discovery. You have to get through the process. This is just a charging indictment. It means nothing. It means he's not guilty, but you have to get through the initial appearance, the arraignment. Then within 14 days, you can file your motions, ask for discovery, but then you get the evidence. But there's nothing untoward here.
Bill, very quickly, Lindsay Halligan, the brand new U.S. attorney of the Eastern District, was in court herself for the hearing. She brought in 2 attorneys from North Carolina to back her up. The New York Times is reporting she's having a hard time getting anyone in the Eastern District of Virginia to help her with the case. If that is true, what does that mean?
Well, it's very unusual for the sitting U.S. attorney in any district to actually prosecute a case. There's the U.S. attorney appointed by the president. There's the first assistant. And then there's the line AUSAs who actually prosecute cases. Now, if she couldn't get anybody from that particular district, it's her prerogative to bring somebody in. But it's usually the soldiers. Like, you don't have generals usually
But
fighting
it's
in the field.
unusual to go to another district, another state, to find lawyers, right? I mean, it was...
Unusual, but not unprecedented. And she has the right to prosecute this the way she feels fit. But the thing to focus on is that Comey, regardless of the fact he was the director of the FBI, he was the SDNY U.S. attorney, he has all these credentials. He is a defendant now in a criminal case, and he has to take this seriously. She can pick whatever she wants.
All right, Bill Brennan, John Fishwick, I'm sure this won't be the last we're going to hear about this case. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Hey, John. Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, turning now to a story we've been following since the very start, that 5-month manhunt for the last prisoner who escaped a New Orleans jail. It's finally over. Convicted Mardi Gras killer, 28-year-old Derek Groves, was captured in Atlanta earlier today. Police found him hiding in a crawl space of a house. They had to deploy gas canisters to get him out. Groves has been on the run since May. He and 9 other inmates broke out of the New Orleans prison parish by cutting a hole in a jail cell wall behind a toilet. A massive manhunt across multiple states ensued. 3 men were captured just hours later, but all the rest were captured weeks later, all except for Groves. In total, he was on the run for 145 days. Amazing. Coming up for us, police say they have finally arrested the person who started that deadly Palisades wildfire. Up next, we delve into the evidence authorities say led them to their suspect. And later, NewsNation hasn't forgotten about that toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Rich McHugh has an exclusive report about more residents whose health conditions may have been hidden to get a class action lawsuit approved. California authorities tonight say the person responsible for starting what became one of the most destructive wildfires in Los Angeles history is a 29-year-old former Uber driver with a penchant for French rap music. 9 months after the deadly Palisades fire began, causing 12 deaths and more than $100 billion in damage, police arrested this man, Jonathan Rinderknecht, at his Florida home. He appeared before a federal judge in Orlando this morning. Authorities say he moved to Florida after starting a fire in Los Angeles on New Year's Day that eventually led to the devastating Palisades fire. The criminal complaint details a timeline of his actions. It says that just after midnight on January 1st, he dropped off an Uber passenger in the Pacific Palisades. They say Rinderknecht then hiked up a trail and shot videos of the area while listening repeatedly to a song by French rap artist Josman. That song's music video allegedly shows objects being set on fire. Police say he then set a fire himself and tried to call 911 to report the blaze, but couldn't get through because he had no cell service. In a press conference today, the acting federal prosecutor in Los Angeles said Rinderknecht lied about his location when questioned by police.
During his interview, he lied about where he was when he first saw the Lockman fire, claiming he was near the bottom of a hiking trail. Geolocation data for the 911 calls showed that he was standing above the fire in a clearing merely 30 feet from the blaze as it rapidly grew.
Firefighters were able to knock that fire down, but authorities say it continued to smolder deep underground for days, and that when high winds hit a week later, those embers erupted above ground, igniting what is known as the Palisades fire. That blaze burned for weeks, destroying more than 23,000 acres. Authorities say Rinderknecht told them details about the fire that only a witness would know. And they claim that his ChatGPT log shows he created an image showing a burning forest and burning cities and people fleeing the inferno. To break all this down, we're joined by Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor for the Southern District of California, now president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, and Rick Crawford, former battalion chief for the Los Angeles Fire Department. Thank you both so much for joining us. So, Nima, this 29-year-old isn't charged with starting the Palisades fire per se. He's charged with setting a fire a week earlier. Firefighters say they put it out, but those embers burned underground. What do you make of this? Is it unusual to have a case like this?
It is unusual, Elizabeth, but I do think prosecutors will get there. We know the defense is going to attack causation here, saying that, of course, he's responsible for that January 1st Lockman fire, but it wasn't a rekindling. It was a new fire that was ignited, or it was the elements, the drought, the heat, the winds that caused that January 7th fire. So expect to see a battle of the experts at trial in this case, because that's really the only defense here. And even though he hasn't been charged with murder, I say that yet, I expect when prosecutors go to the grand jury to get an indictment, we are going to see felony murder charges, which, of course, under federal law, carry the potential for the death penalty. I'm not saying that's going to be filed in this case, but the exposure is going to be significant. We're talking a potential life sentence, maybe even death row. So that causation is going to be the key defense and really the only defense in the case.
Yeah, Rick, I'm going to get to you in just a second, but Nima, that was a question I had for you later on. I did, given the fact that 12 people died in this fire, it surprised me that they just charged him with starting the fire, not with causing the deaths.
I think they wanted to get him from Florida to Los Angeles right away. You can do that on a criminal complaint. Obviously, for a felony case, you got to get a grand jury indictment or you got to go to a preliminary hearing in the federal system. You usually go to the grand jury. So expect to see those charges. At a minimum, Elizabeth, manslaughter. 12 people died here. And like you said, in one of the worst fires in California history, but probably murder as well.
Rick, does this also raise questions for the LA Fire Department on why it failed to fully extinguish that New Year's Day fire?
Well, first of all, that's a great question that everyone's asking, Elizabeth. And, first of all, outstanding work by the investigators. Arson is one of the hardest crimes to prove. This investigation was a joint effort between the DOJ, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, LAFD, and LAPD. And when agencies collaborate, justice moves faster. Now, a series of missteps happened prior to the fire on January 7th, including lack of, failure to extinguish this fire completely, what we call a mop-up policy. And let's just explain what mop-up is really quickly. Mop-up is just a critical phase of firefighting. It's ensuring this fire is completely extinguished by cooling hot spots or returning debris and verifying no hidden embers remain. And it's the big difference between control and containment.
Did they not do that here?
Well, we'll find out here in this after-action report. That's going to be a key factor here. That's going to be coming out in the next 48 hours. And what I got from my colleagues, previous colleagues in that at the fire, was days leading up to the fire of January 7th. They were still feeling heat on that hillside when they were removing hose off that fire. So we'd have to look at what day the hose were removed, but you can tell that there was heat, and it's not uncommon for embers to come outside of a fire line when you don't adhere to the policy.
Yeah, this is a common thing. I remember when we were covering the Palisades fire, I was learning all about it, along with our audience, about these underground embers that can burn and remain for months, until they explode. And obviously the high winds, the incredible high winds were the spark here. Rick, I want to just ask you, because I'm sure you know a bit about firebugs and their behavior. There's some interesting detail in the documents that prosecutors released today about this man. Rinderknecht was working as an Uber driver in LA. His passengers that night, it was New Year's Eve, report he was angry and agitated. The authorities say he was obsessed with fire. He had all these images on his phone that were creepy. And then apparently, when you talk about the thoroughness of this investigation, they not only were able to geo-track his phone to know that he was lying when he said he wasn't near where the blaze began. He was right near it. He lied and said he was down the hill, according to authorities. But then apparently he went on his phone to ask ChatGPT, are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes?
This is typical firebug behavior. An arson investigator, as you look at investigators, what they do is they look at the behavior of a person like this individual. And what happens is they like to watch their work. Lots of times they want to help put the fire out. They've had an interest in being a firefighter at some point and not be able to quite make it there. So he's exhibited some classic behaviors of a firebug, an arsonist. And just to show you technology in action, things like being able to geolocate him, infrared drones to map the fire's perimeter and capture the hot spots in real time shows technology is one of our best witnesses. And as part of the evidence collection and then testing the hypothesis of the investigators, just goes to show that they were able to put together this thing in real time. They were doing this back in April. They started this testing process.
Right.
So it's taken them this long to get to this point, but they wanted to make sure their case was rock solid.
Super quick, Nima, what happens next in this case?
What happens next is an initial arraignment in court here in LA, grand jury indictment. He's going to be assigned counsel, and they're going to start litigating these issues with respect to proximate cause. Expect Uber technologies to be brought in. I don't know who they're hiring for drivers, OpenAI for ChatGPT. Everyone's going to be brought into this case. Lots of subpoenas issued. It's going to be a big one.
Good question. Who's Uber hiring to drive their cars? Wow. Nima Rahmani, Rick Crawford, thank you both so much for lending us your expertise. Appreciate it. Coming up for us, the country's airports are already understaffed, and now they're getting hit with another crisis. It's the government shutdown. Former Governor Chris Sununu is the CEO of Airlines for America. He's live. We'll get his take next. All right, if you're catching a flight anytime soon, you might want to leave a little early, check that flight status. The government shutdown is now causing turbulence at some airports across the country. The FAA is already facing a shortage of more than 3,000 air traffic controllers. And now the ones who are working without pay because Congress is, shut down. And many of those controllers are starting to call out sick. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said this week that is all putting pressure on an already fragile system.
They're not just now thinking about the airspace and the jobs they have to do in these towers or TRACONs or centers across the country. They're thinking about, am I going to get a paycheck? And their paychecks should come a week from tomorrow. And so now what they think about as they're controlling our airspace is, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How do I make my car payment? I have a couple kids at home. How do I put food on the table?
According to flight tracking site FlightAware, more than 3,000 flights have been delayed into and out of the U.S. just today. To get reaction, let's have former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, current president and CEO of Airlines for America, join us. Chris, great to see you again. Thousands of flights are delayed, hundreds canceled. Chicago's O'Hare Airport, one of the busiest in the country, was expected to operate without a full staff of air traffic controllers. Is this safe?
It's safe. It really is, and that's the best word to start with. The reason we have these delays, the reason, unfortunately, that we have the cancellations is because safety is first, and the FAA understands that, and that means planes are going to be spaced out a little longer because they don't have the enough controllers in some of those areas. And it's not just one region, it's not just one airline or anything like that. The airlines are fully staffed; they're doing everything they can. It's the fragility of the system and the air traffic control shortage from Burbank, we saw it early in the week, to Nashville, to East Coast, West Coast. It's a national problem. It really is. But it's all these mitigation effects are all in the name of safety. And to give the FAA a lot of credit, they're being very creative. The other day when Nashville got jammed up, the folks in Memphis were helping land the Nashville planes, with the technology that was available. When Burbank got held up, San Diego, the controllers in San Diego stepped up to help mitigate that. So they're doing things they don't normally do to be creative, to make sure that passengers can get from A to B.
But without sacrificing safety.
That's right. No, safety is absolutely paramount, and that's why everything is ultimately going to get delayed. And the longer this goes on, the more pressure on this fragile system. We look at what happened back in 2019, 35-day government shutdown. This is different. We're seeing call-outs, we're seeing delays a lot sooner in the government shutdown than we did then, like weeks sooner. So my message to everyone, if folks on the Hill are listening, this is going to get worse faster. So let's not wait for the crunch really to happen. Back in 2019, it was basically the taxiway of LaGuardia that was completely jammed up. That really drove Congress back into action. Let's not do that this time. Right? Let's first appreciate, God bless, all those air traffic controllers that are coming in, knowing they're not going to get a full paycheck this Friday. Yeah. They're still coming in. They're still doing their job. A ton of appreciation. I was with Brian Bedford, the FAA administrator, just an hour ago. First thing he's talking about is safety and appreciation, and God bless it. But those that are calling out, you got to get back to work. You got to support your teams. You got to make sure the American public is taken care of.
Hey, Chris, air traffic controllers are considered essential employees. They must work during a shutdown. Organized sickouts are prohibited by law. What's going on? Why are we seeing this happen? First of all, I know part of the problem is we were already so understaffed that even just one or two calling in sick is a crisis. But
that's right.
But you mentioned a moment ago that we're seeing more of it earlier in the shutdown than we did in previous shutdowns. Why is that?
In 2019, in the middle of the government shutdown, they passed another law that basically talked about a Fairness in Labor Act that basically said even if you call out sick, you're going to get paid. Back then, they weren't sure if they were going to get paid if they called out sick. This new law, this new act that's in place there says you're going to get paid. So therefore, they have a little bit more of a safety net, and you're seeing the call-outs increase in numbers much earlier, much faster. And those are new data points. We're trying to look at this from a very data-specific level. The airlines are providing, as Airlines for America, we're kind of the central nexus for a lot of the airlines here in D.C. We're looking at those data, looking at how many flights are delayed, what the cost is. I mean, we're talking over $1 billion a week in terms of economic impact, and that's just this week, right? So that's just going to grow over time. But again, this one's different, and I think folks in the Hill need to appreciate the rules are a little different, and so they have to act, I think, with a little more expediency to make sure, again, the system is safe, but the system has to have that resiliency for the American customer.
You bet. All right, Chris Sununu. Great to have you back on the air. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Liz.
Coming up for us, another NewsNation exclusive. It's been more than 2.5 years since the people of East Palestine, Ohio, saw their lives forever changed. And now new voices are coming forward and asking to be let out of a massive settlement, calling it a fraud. Rich McHugh is going to have the whole story next. So in theory, class action lawsuits are supposed to provide compensation and justice to victims of corporate negligence or malfeasance. But they're notorious for shortchanging those plaintiffs and lining the pockets of the lawyers hired to advocate for them instead. Did something similar happen with the notorious East Palestine train derailment? Well, a whistleblower is now coming forward with claims that the attorneys representing victims in their $600 million lawsuit against Norfolk Southern knew more than they let on. That whistleblower says those lawyers deceived their own clients, alleging that the victims essentially got sold out by their own lawyers who just wanted the case settled. NewsNation's Rich McHugh has been leading the coverage on this story since the train derailment happened in February of 2023. Rich, what did you learn?
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, her name is Beth Kozar. She is the sister of the legendary football QB Bernie Kosar. She worked in an independent claims company helping East Palestine residents join that massive $600 million suit against Norfolk Southern. She thought she was helping. Not anymore. Today, she says this was all a money grab.
I'm not an anonymous whistleblower.
Among the hundreds gathered inside this recent East Palestine town hall was a woman considering blowing the whistle publicly.
I have tried. I have called our governor. I tried all our representatives. Nobody cares anymore.
Today, Beth Kozar is coming forward.
People who signed up for this lawsuit signed up not knowing all the facts.
Sister of legendary quarterback Bernie Kosar and daughter to the late Bernie Kosar Sr., beloved mayor of Canton, Ohio, Beth Kozar worked for Perfected Claims, a company that said it was working with law firms to provide support for the East Palestine train derailment class action lawsuit.
We let a lot of people down.
Why is Kozar going public now? She says she felt she had to after seeing Austin Druckenbrod's story. He was an otherwise healthy 24-year-old in 2023. Today, he has swelling on his brain. The Cleveland Clinic diagnosed him with reactive airway disease, which they linked to exposure to the chemicals in East Palestine. Austin says his attorney said the deal was simple. Agree to the settlement terms of the class action lawsuit, but keep your mouth shut.
We're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure you get $3 to $6.8 million and all of the, and then they told me to not tell anybody.
Druckenbrod's former attorney, Michael Watts, denied the characterization, saying, "I did not communicate with him to stay quiet. If he believed that he had a personal injury claim worth pursuing, we certainly advocated for those clients to simply opt out and continue to pursue the personal injury litigation." But Kozar says Austin Druckenbrod is 100% accurate.
Everybody was pushing to sign the personal injuries. We were told, if you don't want to sign, if you want to opt out, go ahead, but we are not going to represent you because we don't want to upset the judge. You know, I thought some of those attorneys were my friends, and it turns out, you know, I feel like it was a money grab.
Kozar, along with over 200 East Palestine residents, filed a motion in federal court asking to be let out of the settlement based on substantial evidence of fraud and misrepresentation by class counsel.
She knows about the people who were sick. She thought that what she was doing there was for the good of the community. She was betrayed.
Kozar says the cover-up has been worse than the crime.
I'm more mad at the government and people that were supposed to protect us.
Now, Kozar is part of that motion with her two sons, who she says are sick, and her late father, Bernie Kozar Sr., who passed away from bladder cancer, which she believes he contracted while in East Palestine. We asked class counsel for comment. Michael Watts, he responded, denied the characterization once again, and said no one from his firm was authorized to speak to clients in that matter. They have yet to respond to the official motion in federal court, and when they do, Elizabeth, it will be up to this federal judge.
Wow. These folks in East Palestine, it just never ends. Rich McHugh, thank you so much. All right, coming up for us, President Trump says Chicago's mayor and Illinois' governor should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. Governor Pritzker says, bring it on. In a moment, Stephen A. Smith joins Chris Cuomo to talk about it. Chris will join me live next. All right, lots of threats today from President Trump toward the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago over what he alleges is their inability or refusal to protect ICE agents. Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris, you got a big show tonight. You got Stephen A. Smith. I'm sure you guys are going to be talking about this, among other things.
Got the breaking news about phase one of the peace deal. I've got two really good lawyers from federal practice about this very gray area that we're entering into here with the National Guard and federal versus state law. You know, that may seem in the weeds for people, but it isn't, because it's literally playing out in terms of who's right and who's wrong.
It's the heart of the
conflict.
conflict.
I got Stephen A. Smith on. Yeah, so, yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, I am... what's the phrase we always use? Cautiously optimistic that the president's people have it right, and that these terrorists have at least agreed to phase one with Israel. That would be tremendous for the families who've just suffered way too long.
Yeah.
And I know right now all these people will mean, oh, you mean the families in Gaza? No, I mean the families of the hostages in Israel who have dealt with this for 2 years. So there's a lot of pain to go around, and hopefully they're right about the peace.
Let's keep our fingers crossed, you know. Anyway, big show. I'll let you get to it. Have a good one.
No, Elizabeth. Where are you headed now? Where are you going?
I'm off to give a speech, actually.
Really?
Yes.
What's the speech for? I heard it's not a speech. I heard it's a receiving of an award.
Yeah, I am receiving an award.
What you are, which is one of the best to do the job. And you are being recognized tonight.
I am being recognized. You are so sweet to do that. Gosh, you've got a lot of news to get to, though. I think you should get to it.
Nothing matters to me more than that. It is good to see a good person get something good.
You are the very best.
So enjoy.
Thank you.